Few announcements to start. This is February, obviously. We do have still room on our trip to Costa Rica, which is coming up the end of March, the last 2 weeks in March, if that would interest. It's only $1,445 for the whole thing, unless you want a private room, in which case it's $295 more, but that's for the whole time that we're there, just for that. And of course, you got to pay for it to get there, but it's beginning to come together kind of nicely. We'll be studying A Course in Miracles for an hour or two, probably in the morning around breakfast time, and then after that, we'll kind of go out and have fun visiting in a warm climate. And then just a week after that, after we get back, there's Las Vegas, the International Conference on A Course in Miracles. And just to let you know, I've been given 10 tickets that are for $390 each. Now, it costs $599 at the moment. So if you want to, there's a number that I can give you a call. I don't actually have the tickets, but there's a number that you can call and you can get a lower rate for that if you're interested. So those are the primary things for today, and we'll kind of jump into our chapter, which is 27, which is the healing of the dream. Now, there's something a little different about what we've never done this before. I've never even tried this before. We're going to try to doing some PowerPoint stuff. So seeing how this is our first try, you will forgive me. You know something about forgiveness? You've been practicing forgiveness? Bill Thedford, I'm sure I've told you this story before, but Bill, during the last couple of years of his life, if anybody would ask him what he's been doing, he'd say, practicing forgiveness. Except the day before he died, he stopped doing that. He said, I feel complete. He says, I feel whole. I feel completely cleaned out. Isn't that an interesting thing to say the day before? There was nothing left. Right? Nothing left. So watch out if you go all the way with this. Then you may have a hard time holding on to this body. That's a part of what 27 is about. It's about our relationship with the body, but more it's about really our relationship with the mind, which is what we really are. As you know, the body actually is not only simply temporal, it is very temporal and will disappear sooner than most of us can probably even imagine, right? And so by the way, that makes me think my new book, which is called Eternal Life in A Course in Miracles, is set for release in April, so it's only a couple months away from being out. You can already buy it, pre-order on Amazon.com. You can go in and get, but if you come here, I will actually autograph one for you, if you like that sort of thing. So let's jump into this. As I wrote these notes, I write these notes as I read the book and I write the notes. Obviously, I don't always stick closely to the notes. We will be going over most of what the quotes are in here. And I must admit that I had started writing these. Did anybody see the series on Bernard Madoff on the ABC special a couple of weeks ago? Well, that affected me in a way that I still found myself thinking about it the next day. And so I'm writing about that for several days thereafter. And actually did quite a bit of research. Going online and finding out where is he today, what's he thinking about today, that kind of stuff. In terms of the course, well, let's start off here. Let's go to, so you see how we start. Oh, first we have to plug it in. And I need to go back one. Okay, so this is an important line from the Course. This is an insane world, and do not underestimate the extent of its insanity. There is no area of your perception that has not touched, right? And your dream, we're going to talk a lot today about what the dream is. Your dream is sacred to you. That is why God placed the Holy Spirit in you where you place the dream. Now we're going to spend, as I said, quite a bit of time talking about what the dream is. There's three dreams, okay? So we'll start talking about what the dreams are, even though I'll probably come back to it again a little bit later. So the first dream, which is really only talked about in this chapter, but it's something that Ken Wapnick emphasized a lot, and it's called the secret dream, all right? So let's begin to talk what the secret dream is. So there's a secret dream, there's what the Course calls the dreaming of the world, and then there's something we call a happy dream, which is really the beginning of awakening, which is the beginning of finding a door out, right? But the secret dream, we all know about the secret dream. First of all, it's this dream that's it's there inside all of our minds. It's, that thing that talks to yourself. We all know about that guy, right? Or that woman, whoever she is, whoever it is. It sort of bangs around and tells us sometimes not so nice things about ourselves. You idiot, you stupid, you look what you did. Why did you say that? What were you thinking? You weren't thinking, obviously. That antagonistic part of us. Or it may be the part of us that thinks we're greater than somebody else is, right? But also the secret dream, if we go down to the core of the core of the core, is the point at which we decided, you decided, I decided, somehow or another we decided to leave home and to leave God. And we're all prodigal sons and daughters in that sense. And that we've all said, thank you very much, God, I'd rather do it myself. And God can't stop us. Just as you read the prodigal son story, the father makes no attempt to stop the son from going. In fact, is the second line in that is he divided up his property and gave it to him. Right? So we have free will, and we're going to use our free will so we can go off. And we come into this world, and this world really appears to be very, very real, what we call a real world. I mean, it has all these physical dimensions to it, and our bodies have this physical dimension to it, and it really seems like we are these bodies. Children are born, it takes a long time to kind of get used to the fact that you got a body. We said, I think last time, other animals, they can fend for themselves right away, but these human bodies can't. It takes a long time to learn. I shared with you my experience with encephalitis several years ago, in which I came back like a baby. I mean, literally came back to learning how to, with some degree of fascination, just adjusting to this body and what was this thing. And, it didn't take nearly as long as it took a baby, but it took me a month instead of years to get back into integration and to understand, but back to being fully kind of in the world, right? But at the heart of it all is this secret dream, which is a choice. Now, someday I keep saying I'm going to write something about Ken's major points. I'm beginning to see more and more and more. I realized that he had certain major points, and one of the major points was looking. This is very, very, we don't look. We know about the secret dream, but we don't kind of question how we got into this place. Right? The Course is really causing us to question how we got into these bodies, how we got into this world, how we came into this space, how we came into this time, and what the nature of this reality is in the first place. But here we are, right? And obviously the Course is saying, you chose this. And not only did you choose it, you chose every aspect of it. And I mean every aspect. There's not one thing even, the Course, that happens to us that's not a part of our choice, right? Which can be kind of hard for us if you think, well, I didn't ask for this illness, for example, right? I had cancer, as you all know, and that was my first thought, is that I never asked for this. but then I had to recognize the fact that I had it. So if I had it, I must have asked for it, because there it was. It was in this experience. There was no doubting about the fact that I was having this experience. So we may say that's about a relationship that we're in, or we may say something about how things are at work. We didn't ask for this. But the Course is very clear that this is a classroom. We are all students. We are all learning. What we're trying to learn is we're trying to remember. We're trying to remember. We're trying to get back to that point at which the decision was made to actually, if you will, fall asleep, which is the same thing as coming into the world, right? We're going to be looking a little bit later. I've got a quote up here from, or not a quote, but a little piece about Gurdjieff, who said that we were all sleepwalkers, that very, very few people are awake. Now, the good news is that you wouldn't be sitting here if you weren't awake enough to know that this is true. In other words, so we're not in a state of complete hypnosis, but we're not fully awake either. If you're fully awake, then you're done, like Bill. You know, we're really, really done. And you can either then just sort of relax and wait for the final days, or do something. You know, do something worthwhile. Make a contribution to the world. Share what you've got, what you've learned, right? So this is an insane world, and it doesn't take a lot to realize it is an insane world. My two favorite shows that I like to watch on television are either history or science, one of the two, right? So one night, a couple of nights ago, before bed, I turned on, there was a show about the Hittites. Anybody know who the Hittites were? Yeah, the Hittites were, they were sort of about the same time as the Egyptians, right? So it's a really, really old culture. There's a lot about them in the Bible, because they were sort of always being regarded as the bad guys, right? But then as I watched the show, it was, well, sometimes the Hittites were the bad guys, but then sometimes the Hittites were the people who were being invaded, and in which case it was somebody else who was the bad guys, right? It was the Egyptians that were the bad guys, or the Persians who were there were always somebody. This whole world, as we, here, let me go up to there. Short horse in history proves. Gibbons, who wrote The Fall and Decline of the Roman Empire, said history is little more than the registry of the crimes, the follies, the misfortunes of mankind, right? Which is true. And then Ralph Waldo Emerson says it's just one damn thing after the other. All right? Well, it is just one damn thing after the other. I mean, right now we're caught in a political mess in terms of trying to decide who the next president of the United States is going to be, and I try not to be political, but it's kind of hard. But as long as we think that we've got enemies out there, as long as we think that there's somebody that needs to be attacked, one of our candidates recently said something about waterboarding wasn't good enough. If he was president, it would be much worse than that, right? The Course in Miracles says anger is never justified. The word is never. The ego would love it if it said sometimes. Because if it said sometimes, we get debates of which times it was and which times it wasn't. It is never, ever justified. And by looking at our secret dream, the Course is really asking us to go back down and really look. If anger comes up in you at any way at all, even in the slightest sense, like just annoyance, a slight annoyance, a little irritation, right? Then we really have to stop and ask, why would I allow for this annoyance? Why would I allow for this irritation, right? And sometimes it becomes a lot more than irritation or annoyance. Sometimes it becomes outrage. That's an interesting word, outrage, right? So they're out there raging, you know, which really means you're really insane, okay? So as it is, we're all insane. But sometimes it can become so overt Where does it come from? Where does our insanity come from? We go down to the core of the thing, and the Course is saying it comes out of fear, right? There's only two choices. We've only got fear and love, one of the two. Those are the only two choices. And the heart of the thing is fear, and what we're afraid of, the big one, is not dying, it's God. We're afraid of God. And the reason why we're afraid of God, because we're afraid that if God were to take control in our lives, we'd be goners. We'd be out. Actually, getting back to God in some sense, I heard Ken talking about this once in a while. It's getting back to nothing. And when I say getting back to nothing, I just mean it's getting back to this, to know you. Know you in terms of the external you that you and I are in the world. But this is actually a good thing. The ego cannot imagine that it's a good thing, because it does mean that the ego is going to be a goner. But there's something, this is what the Course keeps us showing, there's something there that is eternal. We will just use the word mind for it, okay? And what's interesting about the mind is the mind does not have a form, so that it doesn't have, it's not specific, so that's what makes it difficult for us to understand, right? Let's start looking at some more of these. Let me back up here a little bit. So, as I was reading about, and the thing about Madoff, it's really about selfishness. Let's go, I'm on page 2 in the booklet if you want to look at it that way. Self-esteem is an ego term, means nothing more than that the ego has deluded itself into accepting its reality. So this would be the point at which the ego is sort of completely taken over. There's some ways in which the ego does completely take over. There's a couple of ways that we can think about this. When I say completely takes over, I got to add, in terms of the Course, it's not ever, can never be totally complete, even though it may look like it's totally complete. For example, with psychopaths. Okay, a psychopath would appear to be someone who is completely mad. By that I mean the ego has taken over total control. One of the ways you see this, for example, is that psychopaths do not seem to have any remorse. One of the things that I looked up to try to find about Madoff, now keep in mind when I mention anybody's name, that we're really not talking about that person as somebody that I'm saying I'm attacking or saying it's just, but some people are so, they become archetypes for us as examples. Hitler, for example, or Henry VIII, or any typical psychopathic personality that you could point to in the world. They're such loud personalities that we can't help but use them as illustrations. But it's an illustration, but we're not attacking that person, right? So I did some research, and according to which Madoff has never really expressed regret about this. He's not really, in fact, there's been a certain amount of relief. As you know, the relief came when he got caught, because Madoff was referred to as the magician of Wall Street. People called him magician. Now, that's an interesting thing. The Course draws an important distinction between magic and a miracle. First of all, magic is something that happens outside in the world. We're performing, like even healing in that sense is you could do an incantation or a chant or something, and it produces a change in form in the world. I was once in Las Vegas a couple years ago, and I was driving down the highway, and I saw a big billboard for David Copperfield, the magician, and it said, "Come see the great mystic." And I thought, no. This is a magician. This is not a mystic. In fact, there's a tremendous difference between a mystic and a magician. Evelyn Underhill, in her book on mysticism, says, magic wants to get. Mysticism wants to give. Think about that. So magic wants to give. We're going to get something. And one of the things that magic also tries to do is, particularly the conjuring kind of David Copperfield kind of thing, is that its job is to pull the wool over our eyes, all right, to keep us from actually seeing what's going on. So that's why Madoff was a magician. Because people were to call him a magician because he had a way of making money, but it wasn't real. You can only, steal from one part to pay the other part. And Ponzi schemes, by the way, are really insane because it cannot work. It's definitely going to collapse. And the fact that he was able to keep this ball in the air, Richard Dreyfuss played this in such a way that you get this sense that this is Richard Dreyfuss playing, but that he was sort of always, there was this desperate quality underneath always going on, because how is he going to keep this ball in the air forever, knowing that someday it had to fall, and then of course eventually it did fall, and there was actually a strange relief in knowing that he didn't have to keep the ball in the air anymore. Even though he'd ruined the lives of thousands and thousands of people, including people that are very close to him, including members of his own family, including his personal secretary, who actually very clearly loved the guy, and despite that fact, he ruined her along with everyone else, and etc. So all egos, this is good news. I'm sure I've said this before. All egos are destined to implode. That's the really good news. There is no way you can keep this ball in the air forever. And we all know that, even in terms of our own little worlds that we support. And one of the ways that we see that, of course, that's going to happen is that our fear is that we're going to die, which is true. But this doesn't have to be something that's tread. Now, when we die, obviously, a lot of the ball, the keeping the personality, the name, all this stuff is going to disappear. Think about this, right? Occupation, that doesn't mean anything. Sex, nationality, religion, none of that it doesn't mean anything. And yet we can get very caught in any of those ideas, as though thinking I'm an Irishman, or I'm an Englishman, or I'm an American, or whatever it is. That none of that holds. The Course is so very, very clear that we're all absolutely equal, which means that we must see each other that way. And we must be looking, and I've said this a lot in the past, looking for the health that's in, the innocence that's in somebody else. There's a line in the Course where it says the only way that you can heal another person, and this is particularly true psychologically speaking, is by seeing the sanity in them. The sanity, not the insanity. We're very good at seeing the insanity. We're very good at commenting on the insanity that we see in the world. It often becomes conversation over dinner or over coffee or whatever it is that we're doing. When we're visiting with friends. Let's go on with some of these quotes. So let me do this one. Self-esteem, again, in ego terms, means nothing more than the ego has deluded itself into accepting its reality. So we can delude ourselves. So Madoff had completely deluded, right? Accepting this reality. And a lot of other people got deluded too, kind of going along with the idea, hey, I'm making a lot of money off of this, right? And therefore temporarily less predatory. This self-esteem is always vulnerable to stress. That's one of as Dreyfuss was portraying Madoff, the stress that this guy was under was just humongous. But again, where's happiness when your life is 100% stress all the time and fear all the time that the other shoe's going to drop, and the whole thing's going to fall apart. A term which refers to any perceived threat to the ego's existence. So the perceived threat is there, but guess who created the perceived threat? So selfishness, this is a quote I like a lot from the Course. Selfishness is of the ego, but self-fullness is of spirit, because that is how God created it. It's a very important distinction. So I think last time I talked a good bit about how selfishness is sort of, again, if we could come down to one word that would be sort of the root of our problem, it's selfishness. Somehow or another and that's a part of the secret dream, is that we've broken off out of selfishness. We've broken away from God. We say, I'm going to do it myself. All right. But self-fullness, this self-fullness is giving. I put a little quote on my website just for this week, and because of Valentine's Day, from Henry David Thoreau, which says the only solution to love is to love more. Which is that's great. I mean, the only thing you can do with love is just love more. And that's great for Valentine's Day, right? So we just keep loving. We just keep, and the term the Course uses here is the word extension. So we keep extending love. We just keep doing it, we keep doing it, and which is exactly the opposite of selfishness. We're looking to bring joy. Well, on Valentine's Day, we're bringing joy to our mates, our lovers, or whoever, but this would apply to everybody. Right? All right, so let's go on. I did that already. So I want to use this one too. Few appreciate the real power of the mind, and no one remains fully aware of it all of the time. So the mind, the Course says the mind is very powerful. Think what Madoff did. Think of all the insanity that we can use the mind to create. And I'm just talking with Paul, riding down in the car today, about, isn't it remarkable the age we live in? Have anybody got an echo? I'm talking about with an echo? I mean, technologically, the things that it's happening so fast now that there's all these possibilities out there. It's just, the mind is very powerful. We can create incredible things. And it's getting faster, obviously. Things you must realize and realize fully. The mind is powerful and never loses its creative force. It never sleeps. So even though we're asleep at night, the mind is not sleeping. We may have shut ourselves off from it, but we know that it's still working. It's still working in dreams, and even we understand below that, in another dimension, which we can't really get to, but we do become aware of it as we begin to wake up in the morning. We come back to consciousness. Isn't it interesting how we really kind of die every night? And we willingly give ourselves to this death, right? But we do so knowing that we're going to be refreshed there after it's over. Let's go further. So the Course says, you cannot sell your soul, but you can sell your awareness of it. You cannot perceive your soul, but you will not know it while you perceive something else as more valuable. Let's go through this more slowly. We can't sell our soul, but we can sell our awareness of it. So I'm assuming that in a case like Madoff, right, there's very little awareness that there is another dimension, that there is a soul. Again, the good news, the Course says, you can't do it completely. You can get so deluded, the world can seem so very, very real. But then also that can get you to a point of stress, because if it is, then this is it. If this is all there is, then let's keep dancing, right? You cannot perceive your soul, but you will not know it while you perceive something else as more valuable. Keep in mind, the soul, like the mind, like love, it doesn't have a form. We live in a world of form. And there's a certain sense in which we're also trapped in form. By that I mean we're very seduced by form. We're very seduced by the way things look. For example, how we're dressed, and whatever it is, and we got to do it the right way. Because if it's not exactly perfectly right, then something is amiss, right? Very seduced by form. All right, let's go on here. So there's two kinds of dreams. There's the secret dream, and the heart of the secret dream is the thought that I've separated myself from God. I did something wrong, right? And for that we feel guilt, right? There's this kind of like existential angst. Something went wrong somewhere, right? And then there's the dreaming of the world. Now, the dreaming of the world is something that we share in concert, right? It's both. We both have our individual dreams about the world, and then there's the world that we share in concert. If you travel much, you see there's all different kinds of ways of making up the world. If you study history very much, you see there's all different kinds of ways of making up the world. So the dreaming of the world is but a part of your own dream you gave away and saw it as if it were its start and ending both. Yet was it started by your secret dream. So the dreaming of the world comes out of the secret. The first, there's a level to this, right? So the first level is the secret dream. Then the dreaming of the world comes out of it. What you do not perceive, although it caused the part you see. We don't see the secret dream. That we don't see the secret dream because it's really in the unconscious. I mean, it's really buried. It's buried so deep that although it has its effect, we're not really aware of it. And you do not deny it, doubt it's real. The world looks very real. I mean, to a lot of people, the Course in Miracles doesn't make any sense at all. This is just some sort of ridiculous hocus-pocus metaphysical mythology. The Course is saying, yeah, but it's time we woke up to the awareness that it's a mythology that we all are partaking part in. Right? How could you doubt it while you lie asleep and dream in secret that its cause is real? So it all looks very, very real. All the politics, all the antagonism, all the fighting, all the... Today, the question is who will be the next judge, right? And that's going to become very real for us to talk about all of that. Like, this all is so very, very real. It's also very, very important, right? Everything that's on the outside, it's just on the outside. Let's go with it. It seems to be working. So I mentioned Gurdjieff earlier. Gurdjieff was the one who said that we're all sleepwalkers. And actually, in Gurdjieff's terms, nobody is really awake unless you're an enlightened being, right? There's a lot of it. And what's in the Course, there's a lot of it that's in pre-Course, because the truth is true. And because it's always been there, and it's always found a way of coming up and being met, particularly with the mystics, right? And so, this is another of my favorite guys here, Nietzsche. The Christian resolve to find the world ugly and bad has made the world ugly and bad. But leave the word Christian out for a moment. Let's just say the ego's resolve to find the world ugly and bad has made the world ugly and bad. Right? And it will always be that way. So the Course is asking us to stop the dream. Well, actually, it's asking us to stop the nightmare. It's asking us to realize that we do live in a nightmare world. And you could dream a different kind of dream. We could begin to dream what the Course is going to call a happy dream, which is really the dream of awakening. It's the dream of forgiveness. Now, forgiveness, as we know, is the key. It's the key that turns this whole thing. We've got to have something that turns it around. that turns our mind and begins to enable us. So we got to learn how to learn to practice forgiveness even when you don't want to. Now I say even when you don't want to is because you still, the Course is telling you this is the right thing to do. Practice this. And anytime you've got to make a decision, it's a very simple thing to do. Just say to yourself, what's the right thing to do? And look, this again, I remember that Ken said, look, is my decision coming out of fear? Well, if it's coming out of fear, it's probably not the right thing to do. Or can I come out of love? Let's say that, seeing how this is Valentine's Day, that your mate attacks you in some way. So at that point, we had the opportunity to respond with love or with fear. And the more times we can get this right, then the happier the situation we're going to have. All we got to just keep choosing out of love. Even when, here's a good one, even when they're wrong. Really, even when they're wrong. Because it's just a matter of looking, why am I so attached to it? Let it be what it is. It's one of my favorite. Let it be what it is. Seek not to make of love an enemy. That's a primary line in the Course. Chapter 19. Let it be what it is. Let him be. Let her be. Let it be. Let the situation be. One of the hardest things for us to do.
You said it right.
Pardon? Yes, let it be. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they were pretty bright in that sense, right? Just let it be. Let it be. Let it be. Okay, our list is actually working out better than I thought it would. Although I'm not sticking too close to the notes here. So the little gap you do not even see, the birthplace of illusion and of fear, the time of terror and of ancient hate, the instant of disaster, all are here. They're here in this secret dream. Here is the cause of unreality, and it is here that it will be undone. You clear what the here is that I keep reading here? The here is the core, the center of the place of decision making, a point at which we decide to go for fear instead of love, for example. That's why there's so much emphasis here about going down to the center of the core, and looking at who is the decider. That's a very important question. Who is Charlie the chooser? This is the one remaining freedom. Of course, the one remaining freedom you have. The one remaining freedom you have is the freedom to choose, to make the right choice. Just say, what is the right thing, and then to do it, and to be very, very aware. I have a new CD, except I sold out on them. I'll have them on order to get a new batch. I talked about it once before here. What's called word fasting, the miracle diet. But it works. When I say it works, I mean it's just watching the words that come out of our mouths. Because we are really always giving ourselves away. And if you watch some of the words and you think, where did disappointed, upset, why am I using words like disappointed or upset? And the real question always is in those cases, what is it that's upset? What is it that's disappointed? That's the core that we're getting down to. It's not this surface thing that I'm presenting to the world. It's a deeper quality than that. That's where the change can occur. Well, let's go on with this. Well, we've already talked about anger is never justified. Just let's underline the word never, okay? No one can awaken from a dream. The world is dreaming for him. He becomes a part of someone else's dream. He cannot choose to awaken from a dream he did not make. Helpless he stands, a victim to a dream conceived and cherished by a separated mind. Now, this is what we think. No one can awaken from a dream. The world is dreaming for. Now, we're dreaming the world. We're dreaming this dream together. He becomes a part of someone else's dream. Sometimes we may feel as though we do become a part of someone else's dream. Say, your boss's dream. You know, say, you know, who your family's dream, your parents' dream. Yes.
What about the
Why don't you take the mic? I'm sorry. Not on why don't you? You have to.
I'm happy to speak into the mic.
Yeah.
So
I'll sit down a second.
the news is constantly spinning dreams.
Yes.
And the one I saw today was an official saying, we can definitely expect ISIS to attack America. So now in this little gap, now we can start thinking and expecting and waiting and wondering, is ISIS going to attack? When are they going to attack? Now we have a consensus dream. And I don't know, maybe ISIS never even thought about attacking that seriously. I don't know. But all of a sudden now, wow, they got to attack.
Right.
So, anyway.
No, it's a good point. But what I'd like to emphasize about your point as well is that as long as we see enemies out there, there will be enemies out there. But a good part of this is that we're seeing enemies out there. We're seeing the problem. Seeing the problem is a good part of the creation of the problem. It is the creation of the problem, right? So if we were loving ISIS, if we were sending aid to ISIS, I mean, not military, but medical or, educational, that sort of thing, wouldn't that change everything? The moment you see the enemy, the Course is saying there is no enemy. Jesus in the Gospel says, your enemies are those of your own house. Now, when he says the enemies are those of your own, he doesn't mean the people you live with. He means this house. He means the house that's in the mind. So if the house that's in the mind sees enemies, then we make the enemies real. It was sort of interesting just watching this little thing about the Hittites. They were always enemies. They always had enemies to deal with. And sometimes they were the enemies. They got around to a point of being peaceful for a few, maybe 100 years or something, and then they decided it was time to expand their territory, and then they created enemies. Yes, Marvin? Oh, you got to have the mic. Brooke, you just want to be responsible for that mic. Well, you don't have
Is
to.
it on?
Yeah, it's on. You're on.
I'm Jewish, and from a Jewish perspective, if you read the Torah or the New Testament, it says very clearly in many places that in every generation there will be somebody out to get us, to destroy us. Meaning the Jews. But since it's part of the Bible, in the broader perspective, there's always in every generation going to be somebody out to get us, all
Right.
of us. And if that's what the belief is, that's
it.
really insane.
If that's what the belief is, then that's what we will see being manifest in the world. Again, the mind is very powerful. So what are we creating?
And we're always out to fight back because we
Of
perceive
course.
this enemy coming.
Right. So this is why this isn't easy, because it requires a complete reversal in thinking. We have to change the way that we think totally. We have to see there are no enemies except those of my own house, the ones that are in my own mind, that are attacking, right? Again, remember I quoted a line a moment ago from the Course where it says that the only way you can heal someone is by perceiving the sanity in them. Perceiving the sanity, not the insanity. We got to perceive the sanity, and then if we get that, we'll be on our way. Here, Christian, you got to have this.
What about Jesus and the money changers? Wasn't he expressing anger?
Okay, there's a lot of no. Okay, well, there's two or three possibilities there. One is This does not have cross gospel references. It only appears, I think, in one or two gospels. So it may not be a true story for that very reason. There's another possibility is that it just happened in a very matter-of-factual sort of way. By that I mean that he wasn't angry, that he wasn't upset. Rather like my walking into my backyard and seeing deer eating my flowers and vegetables, and I go, shoo! I'm not angry at the deer. The deers are just being deers. I'm just saying, this doesn't fit here. Deers don't work in my flower garden. It may be that. Frankly, I'm questioning whether or not this whole event ever happened. But Christians have really, the whole traditional Christianity has grabbed onto that event as a justification for anger. But the fact still remains that, perhaps the mic back to Patrick. James, I'm sorry. Excuse me, James. Yeah, is the mic on, James? Yeah, but I knew better.
All right. Okay. We're littered with these analogies and these metaphors that were put onto Jesus. I think in the course, like when Judas, he never said, Judas, betray me with a kiss. Okay. This is coming through the course. He didn't buy into all this. Like Judas couldn't betray him because Judas was his brother and his life was an illusion.
That's right.
So this illusion, this is what's being tested. We, as an ego, we're going to latch on to any kind of ego-loaded, any justification to attack your other brother or anything like this. Christ's point was to release this as an illusion, okay, and not reinforce it as an illusion. So I wonder, whether it was really happened or not. I mean, we're pretty ingrained with the Bible.
Right, we are. And of course, it becomes the biblical truth, if you know what I mean. Yes.
I mean, one could say the same thing about him walking on water. I mean,
Yes, you could.
Yeah. So then what?
Well, we don't know how much of this is mythology, right? I mean, a lot of it could be mythology. The part that's real, though, okay, it's the core of the teaching. Say, for example, the Sermon on the Mount, and it's when we get to places like that this really seems quite genuine and quite real, and all the rest of it you can question if you want to. Well, you got to have the mic. I'm sorry. Pass it up to David here. Yeah, leave it on.
The reason he walked on water was because...
No, it's not on. You got the lights on. See the light on?
And the light is on.
The light is on.
The reason he walked on water is because he couldn't swim.
I knew it was going to be something like I just... Had to be a joke. Oh, it's okay. It's all right. We can all use a laugh. Again, it all comes down to reversing the way I think. Okay, over here with
I was just going to say, if it's fun to believe that he walked on water, then you should believe he walked on water. And if it's fun to believe that, what was the other one? That he kicked over a table, you probably should believe that. But it's probably more fun to think ultimately that he didn't kick over a table.
Right.
But I think it's you believe what you want to believe.
Right.
What we need to believe, maybe.
Well, a lot of what we have is, in terms of the dreaming of the world,
You try to choose the dream that suits you best.
when you study the history of the Christian church, you see there was just a tremendous amount of perversion.
Yeah, because there's a new gospel of Judas, which is like completely different.
Yeah, you got to have the mic. But anyhow, we won't go back to it. That's why what we have the course for. The course is really a correction. It's an attempt at correcting a couple of thousand years of mistaken perception. Now, traditional Christians don't like to hear that. They much prefer to think that something that was written a couple thousand years ago is, as we say, the gospel truth. All right? But we keep going deeper in terms of our understanding. We can't. I've said before that I think if the Course in Miracles had shown up during, say, the 19th century, nobody would have understood it. I mean, it's tough enough for us to understand it now, but we had the benefit of modern psychology and much deeper philosophies than we did a couple hundred years ago. But there was still geniuses like Emerson and Thoreau, for example, who had these same insights, and Kierkegaard. I always think it's interesting, people who were contemporaries. I love studying Kierkegaard and Thoreau were contemporaries. I mean, they were born at the same time, they both had short lives, both were single, et cetera, et cetera. But both of them were really calling the church on what it had done, and how it had misrepresented the truth, and therefore were not liked, except by the people except by the mystics. And it's sort of interesting, the Unitarians have sort of adopted Thoreau, but the truth is he never stepped in a Unitarian church. Not that he had to, but he's buried in a Unitarian. So if there was any tradition that he'd been closest to, it would have been the Unitarian tradition. Right? But still, in the way, especially we know in terms of the Catholic Church, when we start adding rules and regulations and dogmas and creeds and the way things have to be done in some sort of specific form, and if it doesn't done in the think of Paul. Can I tell you a story yet? Paul was telling me this when he was a kid. Maybe it'd be larger you tell it, but the kid behind him threw up the communion on his jacket. And Paul got in all kinds of trouble because of it, because he had the host stuck to his. Give him the mic.
Is it on?
Yeah.
It was a day probably darn near as close as this, and I lived 10 blocks away from the church. And the nun's first reaction to the priest was, "Father, should we keep the coat?" And I was a little boy, and the priest, being a little bit more sensible, said, "No, sister, that'll be fine. It'll be fine. I'll just clean it off, and he'll be on his way." And for a little while there, I was shaking in my boots.
And didn't know why. What had he done? All right. Actually, I just noticed we're at 2:30. We're an hour. So let's take our first break.